really pleased to introduce Natalie Hrizi. Besides both of us being parents, we are both public school teachers. Natalie is a bilingual teacher in San Francisco. She's running for insurance commissioner. We're very proud to have us as our Peace and Freedom Party candidates. She's running on a slogan of free quality health care for everyone and abolish the insurance companies. Natalie lives in San Francisco with her son, and I'm very pleased to have Natalie Hrizi here today.
Thank you very much for coming out today. The number flying around in the press right now in regards to healthcare is 8 million. 8 million sign-ups for the new healthcare exchanges under what is commonly called Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act. Just a few years ago, the number always associated with healthcare was 47 million. 47 million people who had no access to healthcare, and many millions more who had limited access, which really meant no functional access. And I think those two numbers are sort of a perfect characterization of what the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare has meant for people in terms of access to healthcare. Millions of people have gotten access to healthcare. Some slight reforms have made progressive changes. That means that people have gotten an access to something they don't need. Or they do need, sorry, they very badly need. But overall, it's a Band-Aid applied to a gushing wound. It's a crisis that will continue, and everyone knows it will continue. All the numbers of how many tens of millions of people continue to be uninsured and will be uninsured when it's all rolled out in a couple of years means it's totally common knowledge that there has been a Band-Aid applied to this crisis. And I think we need to recognize what happened. The reform was made based on the idea that the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies, which helped to write the Reform Act, both when it was instituted in Massachusetts, which is basically what the reform was based on, they helped to write the act, and they codified, they institutionalized their own profit into healthcare reform. So people are forced to buy health insurance in order to get access to healthcare. That's the fundamental flaw with the ACA and Obamacare. It's the reason it can't solve the healthcare crisis. And my campaign, as Marcia said, calls for healthcare for all and to abolish the insurance companies because we recognize that that is the solution to the healthcare crisis, is moving towards providing healthcare for all individuals. And in order to do that, we have to remove the insurance companies from the question. What do they do? What do insurance companies really do for us as a society? Nothing. Right, nothing. They take our money, and then they use our money to pay their workers to make sure we don't have access to health care when we need it the most. Right. That's what insurance companies do. They take a gamble on our sickness and death in order to make this small group of people who own them richer. And richer and richer and richer, constantly richer. That's the role they play. So we absolutely support the idea of removing the insurance companies as a factor of the question of access to health care. They serve no purpose. They do nothing for us. And we do, as a first step, as an immediately possible first step, advocate for instituting a single-payer healthcare system. Not just in the state of California, where I'm running for insurance commissioner, but across the country. We need a national healthcare program. And I think there's a lot to be said about single-payer healthcare. One of the things, and I don't think we're actually going to run into this in this room, but one of the things is that it's really not understood by people across the nation what it means to call for a single-payer healthcare system. What does that really mean? Well, it means the government becomes the single payer of the healthcare bills of the population. That's all that it means. The government provides what really the quote-unquote service the insurance companies have been providing at no cost. So the government takes on that responsibility. That's a single-payer healthcare system. It's vastly misunderstood in this country, but it's entirely possible, and it's entirely possible right now. So I think we have to, well, I want to say one thing. The way that it is possible, because there's a lot of talk when you bring up a single-payer healthcare system, and this happened to me. I was in I think you also went down for this, but the editorial board of the LA Times interviewed the statewide candidates and the LA County candidates, and you're sitting with them and they're like, well, And they don't take you seriously at first, right? They think you're like a wacky protest candidate. But then you start to talk and they start to listen to you. And as they were listening, they were like, well, how is it going to be paid for? How are you going to do this? How will you institute this? And it's so interesting, right? Because the money exists right now. The huge amount of money the government spends on healthcare. We spend the most on healthcare of any of industrialized countries, yet we get the least bang for our buck. So the money exists. And with a small, not even a tweaking of the tax code. I mean, I'm for taxing the rich, I'm for taxing their wealth, I'm for the things Laura was talking about. We don't even need to do that to pay for a single-payer healthcare system. The money is there right now. And if the corporations were even required to pay the amount of taxes that are on the books right now, if they were even required to do that under this totally reactionary government, the 35%, if they were required to do that, we would have billions of dollars to put in to a healthcare system, and not only a healthcare system, but really supporting public education, really supporting social services for poor and working people. Really, billions of dollars are available. It's a question of priorities. It's a question of the choice the government that represents the rich makes every time they write a budget. Oh, sorry, I'm also loud. I teach fifth graders, you have to be loud. It's a question of what choices the government makes and whose interest they make those choices. And so this government, in the interests of the rich and those who own the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies and the medical profit industry, they make the decision not to fund and not to support single-payer healthcare. And that's exactly what happened with ACA. Single-payer healthcare was never on the table. None of those national reform summits on healthcare were open to the individuals supporting single-payer healthcare. They had to force their way onto the table and then they weren't listened to. But the insurance company executives and the pharmaceutical executives were all sitting right there at the table. And single-payer healthcare is not actually a revolutionary demand. In this society, the way things are going, it sounds like a revolutionary demand. It sounds like a radical demand. But the idea of it, just doing that, is entirely possible under a capitalist system. Canada has a single-payer healthcare system. Taiwan, which is not known as a super progressive capitalist system, has a single-payer healthcare system. Many, many capitalist countries have a single-payer healthcare system. It is entirely possible to win it. But how do we win it? That's the question. That's the question of revolutionary radical thinking. Because how we win it is not by just asking the capitalist government to give us the reforms. Not a single reform has ever been made that way. Making the point that Taiwan has one isn't going to convince any of the capitalist politicians who are in the pockets of the insurance industry owners that we need a single-payer healthcare system. A single-payer healthcare system, the idea of healthcare for all, will be won by a movement in the streets. A movement that is capable of taking on the insurance industries, that mobilize, and we can see this in the history of the single-payer movement, because it's not a new idea. It's not something that we're all of a sudden talking about this year. There has been a very strong, very organized single-payer healthcare movement across the country, but particularly in California, where the California Nurses Association has really formed the backbone of a lot of organizing to win a single-payer healthcare system. And they haven't been defeated because people don't want a single-payer healthcare system. They haven't been defeated because people in this state are backwards or stupid. They've been defeated because of a full mobilization of the insurance companies, the pharmaceutical companies, and the politicians who are allied with them to defeat the movement for single-payer healthcare. One example, and I don't know where I went there, but one example I just want to talk about that's happening right now is on the November ballot, there is, you can vote on the question of the California Department of Insurance being able to approve or deny rate and premium hikes for the insurance companies, which that department currently does not have. And we're going to be able to vote on that in November. And last month, numbers came out showing that the insurance industry, backed by primarily WellPoint Insurance, which is based in Indiana, has already put out $13.4 million to try and get this beaten. So just that minor reform of whether one elected politician can approve or deny premium hikes is already being mobilized again 6 months out before the November election. That's the kind of resources that they mobilize. And they have been victorious, but it doesn't mean that they will be. It doesn't mean that they can always defeat the movement of people in the streets, because we have many, many historical examples that show us that even though we lose and we lose and we lose, sometimes we win. When we're organized, when we're together, when we have allies and we work together and we build a mass movement, the people's movement, the popular demand can win. And I actually think Medicare is an excellent example of this. There are so many. The civil rights movement, you can look at any of the movements that have won major gains. There's so many, but Medicare is an excellent example. Medicare was characterized as a communist takeover of the United States when it was being advocated for. When there was a militant movement supporting the idea of Medicare, which single-payer health care can really be considered Medicare for all. Instead of just a portion of the population, it's everyone. And there's a story that the current director of Covered California tells about his father, who is not a radical, not a revolutionary, helped to start Stanford Hospital. He's a very bourgeois figure, and he was attacked and accused of supporting the communist takeover plot, and his job was threatened when he was a professor at USC because he signed on to an open letter supporting Medicare 10 years before it was instituted. That's the kind of thing that happens when a popular demand starts to get broader and broader support. And Medicare now, if you really talk to people, especially people who get Medicare, about this, they say, no, it's normal, it's what happens, it's part of life, and you can say that about so many things in our lives today, unemployment insurance, all the things that were won by a movement in the streets, not the decision of some politician to hand it down to us. So I think it's very important that we're out here making these demands. But I do want to say that we are running a socialist campaign. You should see our other palm card too, because I think it's good, but this is our new palm card to get people to come out and vote on June 3rd and to vote socialist. Because while single-payer healthcare is a radical demand today, and an important demand, and one we absolutely support, it's a first step. We need a full change of this system to not just provide healthcare for all, but to provide quality, free health care, not just access to it, but to lower costs and to make it something where people are thinking about not cancer treatments when I'm dying, but care for myself when I'm a kid, for dental and vision care, all of these things that we don't even really have when we get into the ACA. Those things are still excluded from it. The question of undocumented immigrants and their access to health care is completely excluded from any reform in this society. And in order to fully guarantee free, quality health care for all, we need a socialist system. We need a change. We need something different that's going to provide for the needs of working and poor people, not for the tiny minority who get the profits merely because they own something, which doesn't make any sense. I'd like to say that under a system, a socialized system, some of the things that currently happen, like a drug shortage for 300 necessary commonly used drugs, that's happening right now. 300 of them are unavailable on the shelves because they don't make a profit for those who produce them. The idea of the hepatitis C drug, Sovaldi, being sold for $1,000 a pill, an entire treatment costs $84,000, that's a crime. And that's a crime that is solvable only by a socialist system. Thank you. Woo!
Now you see why we're very proud that Natalie Hrizi is Peace and Freedom Party candidate.